What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. What is your opinion on Grant Hill's "we're building a team" rhetoric? We're building a team rhetoric. As a Celtics and huge Jaylen Brown fan, I get the White pickup. However, I'm confused as to why Kawhi was on the team in the first place and why Embiid is playing as well. Couple things. Embiid, I think, is playing because he's the fifth best player in the world, and I think that one, he's got the just more star power than Jaylen Brown, and I think that kind of gives him a certain leg up in these discussions. Two, they absolutely need him for the Jokic matchup. Like, he is a specific matchup tool that they need. Why was Kawhi Leonard on the roster? He's Kawhi Leonard. He's, a guy that when he's healthy is considered in that same tier with all those guys at the top of the league, right? Like, this is a guy that is going to hit 55% of his pull-up jumpers, 40% of his threes, is an elite defensive player. Like, when Kawhi is healthy, he's better than Jaylen Brown. I don't know what else to say. Like, yeah, if I'm a general manager, I'd rather have Jaylen Brown because for an 82-game season, I want Jaylen Brown. I just trust him to be available more, right? But like, in terms of their ceilings, Kawhi is a much better player than Jaylen Brown when he is healthy. And so it also just kind of brings a certain cachet. Like, if Kawhi Leonard his agent calls Team USA and goes like, "Hey, Kawhi's healthy and wants to play," like, they're going to answer in a different way than they will for a player that's outside of that tier the way that Jaylen Brown is. As far as the Derek White piece, I didn't think it was that complicated. They're running a lot of drop coverage. I thought they'd be more of a switching team. They still do with the Anthony Davis-Bam groups, but they're running a lot of drop. Especially with Embiid on the floor. They only have one guy on the roster who's like a professional screen navigator in Drew Holiday. I think they view Jaylen Brown as another switching forward, which they already have a lot of. And so they opted for a guard that kind of fits that specific role as like an off-ball cog who also can chase over the top of ball screens and gives them two options there in case something happens with Drew Holiday. You got some flack for suggesting Canada should not have led up in the friendly against the U.S. Why do you think it's important for teams to push themselves even in pre-tournament games? I just think about it from the competitive nature side of it. Like, if you're Canada, you want to beat USA. There's a chance that you don't even get to see them overseas by virtue of maybe just being in a different pool and in single elimination going different routes, right? So there's no guarantee you get to see them again. And what a cool moment! Like, I was there in the arena, guys. That was a basketball moment. The arena was completely packed. There were all these celebrities and famous basketball people there. Both teams were trying super hard. Like, that would have been a cool game to win if you're Canada. And I just thought it was strange that they pulled the plug the way that they did while the game was still in reach. Again, I'm not criticizing the decision in the sense that, like, I'm not saying it's wrong, but as a basketball fan, I wanted to see Canada go back to their starters. And then two, I just can say that I feel pretty confident that the actual Canada starters wanted to go back in. It was a decision from the staff because they are competitors and they wanted to beat the USA team. Who is the better win now player between Kuminga and Podziemski? Seems to me like backup point guard is a bigger need than wing depth for the Warriors with their current roster. Sounds like both would need to go for Laurie, but if you could somehow keep one of them, who do you trust more to help Steph win now? I'd give up both of them if that's what it took. But if I had to choose keeping one, I'd keep Potts. Like, Kuminga is going to be a better player than Podziemski in the long run. He just has too many athletic gifts. But right now, Podziemski is much more of an easy plug-and-play guy that like fills a very specific role. A guy who can run five out, a guy who can defend at the point of attack, a very good rebounder. He kind of fills that Dante DiVincenzo role from last year, right? Like, or from 2 years ago, I should say. Like, I think Brandon Podziemski is much more capable of being a good rotation piece right now within the Warriors than Jonathan Kuminga. So take advantage of Jonathan Kuminga's long-term potential by using him as a trade piece. I know that there are still some Warriors fans that are hung up on Kuminga, but like, and again, I would give up both of them if that's what it took to get Laurie. But if I had to keep one, I'd keep Podziemski. I think he's just a better fit in the short term. Jason, Denver fumbled big time by not winning this year. Things undoubtedly get way harder for them. Had they won, I think you could have put Jokic in a top 20 discussion. Now I think he's firmly not in that. Couple this with the fact that he may not win another ring. And then in parentheses, he says, would say that he doesn't. So a couple things. I'm not ready to punt on Denver. I do think that they are a different basketball team now. One of the specific things that I've always talked about is you have to pick your poison with Denver, right? You've got to double the post. You've got to defend pick and roll 3-on-2. You need to a lot of times have a big man running that low man spot so that he can navigate the Aaron Gordon problem along the baseline, right? Like there are things that they do, but a big part of that is KCP and Michael Porter Jr. on the weak side. They both are just incredibly efficient spot up players to the point where if you do send extra defenders, because that's the whole dynamic, right? You let Jamal Murray and Jokic play 2-man game 2-on-2, you're screwed. Yeah, or 3-man game, I would even call it, with Aaron Gordon on the baseline. If you defend that 3-on-3, you're screwed. If you defend Jokic 1-on-1 in the post, you're screwed. If you switch and let Jamal Murray work on an island, you're screwed, right? But if you send extra defenders, here are these two like otherworldly spot-up players on the other side of the floor. With KCP, it's more closeout attacking. With Michael Porter Jr., it's more three-point shooting. But by the numbers, the two of those guys are two of the very best spot-up guys in the league. And so when you take a player like that and you turn him into, let's just say Christian Brown, right? If it's Christian Brown, that goes from being a like cannot leave him open spot up guy to like somebody that's here you go, 82nd percentile for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, 1.16 points per possession in spot up situations. That's really, really good. That's hard to replicate. And so let's just say they slide Christian Brown into that spot. Now, all of a sudden, it becomes a very simple thing. You're going to ignore Christian Brown the same way that you ignore Aaron Gordon. Those guys are still going to be active as athletes, and they're still going to make a lot happen. But as long as you're big enough around the rim to kind of contend with those guys vertically, you won't have to worry as much about chasing Christian Brown off the line. Now, there's no doubt that Denver got a little bit easier to guard with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope going out. But most basketball teams have that same problem. Denver had this uniquely fitting starting five. Now they have four of those guys, and they're going to have a downgrade at one of those positions, but they're still going to be really, really difficult to guard. Jokic is still the best player in the world. The Jokic-Murray two-man game is still incredibly difficult to deal with. Aaron Gordon is still a handful underneath the basket. They're not going anywhere. It's just their margin for error has gone down a little bit. A couple things. I think Christian Brown is probably spending his entire summer focusing on ball skills, like the ability to run second side action, the ability to hit catch and shoot threes consistently and to drive closeouts, because he knows that could potentially be his role. And then who knows, like Gary Trent Jr. is still out there. And of all of the spots that I think, and I want Gary Trent Jr. to go to the Lakers, that would be ideal because I think they need an athlete at that two-guard spot, but I don't think he's going to go there. And if I was Gary Trent Jr. and I did have to take something like a veteran minimum contract, which hopefully it doesn't end up being the case for his sake. I think he's probably going to end up getting the taxpayer mid-level. But like if he ends up going to take a discount, if you were to play 1 year in Denver alongside Jokic, he could go on a deep playoff run and then sign a much more lucrative deal next summer if that's what he wants. Whereas right now, Gary Trent's kind of in that weird kind of limbo where if he goes next year and has kind of a tough year where maybe he takes more money at a mid-level exception somewhere, but he's playing for some bad team and he continues to kind of show some of his bad habits that he has shown in the last couple of seasons, that could put him in a situation where he suddenly becomes a veteran minimum guy in the future. And so like we've seen before, guys take veteran minimum deals on really good teams that make deep playoff runs and then get more lucrative deals after. We just saw it with Derrick Jones Jr., right? Going to the Clippers and getting a little bit of a paycheck. And so Gary Trent's a guy that like fingers crossed maybe a team like Denver could get to solidify that two-guard spot. But the reality is like there's the more likely outcome is it ends up being a lot of Christian Brown. And there's an upside there. Like as much as Christian Brown is not as good offensively as KCP, I actually do think with his size and strength advantage, he's a little bit more versatile defensively, and he does change the athletic profile of that team in a real way. Like he was the one guy in that Timberwolves series that kind of contended with Anthony Edwards athletically. And so I don't think Denver's going anywhere. They've obviously had a disappointing offseason. The Daron Holmes Achilles tear is devastating. I had heard that they pretty much intended for him to play a lot of backup center next year. They viewed him as an NBA ready kind of guy. And so super, super unfortunate, but don't take away from the fact that you still have Jamal Murray, you still have Michael Porter Jr., you still have Nikola Jokic, you still have Aaron Gordon, you still have the gist of what makes the Nuggets in-house. And I also think that Jokic is going to be on a little bit of a revenge tour this year, and I think that he's going to be the best player in the world. And so I just have a really hard time writing off the Denver Nuggets, and as of right now, they're still my favorite to win the West going into next season. All right. When KD comes back, who loses the starting spot? So I think KD's the easiest plug-and-play guy in the league because he's such a good shooter, such a good closeout attacker, but can also run action, can also beat matchups, and he's also a very good defensive player when he wants to be. So, like, I would probably just slide Tatum to the 2 and move KD into the starting lineup, and I'd take Ant off the bench. Don't think we're going to see that. Ant just got into the starting lineup, hit a bunch of shots again today. I expect Ant to start. But if I was coaching the team, I would go with Steph, Tatum, KD, LeBron, and Anthony Davis at the 5, and I would switch everything. And I think that group would really get the ball moving side to side. And then I'd let Ant come in with the bench group and be like, here are the keys. You and Embiid want to take turns playing one-on-one? Go ahead and be my guest. Do it with the bench group, right? Because I think that starting group needs to get more side-to-side ball and player movement. Since the Celtics won, do you think some of Mazzulla's philosophies will become more pervasive around the league? Things like heavy ball and player movement, driving kick, and an emphasis on getting back on defense, attacking the margins, etc. Love the show. Keep up the great work. Thank you for the support. I think, Mazzulla won me over in a big way in this postseason run. And a big part of it, too, was like, I didn't acknowledge enough during some of the downsides with Boston over the last couple of years that they were learning, meaning the players. Just because the Celtics went down and took 5 or 6 bad threes in a row doesn't mean Joe Mazzulla's in the huddle saying dribble up the floor and take bad threes, right? Joe Mazzulla preaches being deliberate about setting up your spacing. Joe Mazzulla preaches being deliberate about getting the right matchup in the right spot of the floor to get the defense in rotation. Joe Mazzulla preaches attacking and playing quality driving kick basketball from there, getting paint touches, but then making good decisions when you get into the paint, chasing the great shot, not the good shot. Joe Mazzulla teaches all of that stuff. It just took a while for the Celtics to really embrace it the way that they did, right? And like their ugly moments, and they were dominant this year, but their ugly moments, blowing the Cavs game, blowing the Warriors game, they're what were they, 2-4 against the top 3 teams in the Western Conference, right? Like their issues that they had this season primarily centered around not doing what Joe Mazzulla was asking them to do. As far as like it being copied around the league, everything has to do with your personnel. You got to be really careful with taking a coaching philosophy and inflicting it on a roster. You want to look at your roster and you want to build a coaching philosophy that fits that roster, right? And so, for instance, Boston has a lot of guys that have real downhill athleticism that can beat people off the dribble. And from there, they've got a lot of shooting. So for them, driving kick basketball makes a ton of sense. But there are teams out there where driving kick doesn't make a ton of sense, right? And like a big part, like for instance, with Dallas last year, they had all these play finishers. And so it made sense for them to, be a little bit more deliberate in the half court and use your off-ball guys more as play finishers rather than advantage extenders, right? Like that's what makes sense for that particular roster. And so that said, like I do think that more teams that have that type of roster should embrace more of a driving kick style. I think that you will see more and more of it. Anytime you see a team hoist the trophy, it's copycat league. People try to pull from what's being successful elsewhere around the league. As far as the emphasis on attacking the margins, this is something that I've always been a huge believer in, and it's something that's boring to talk about, and it's something that every single player knows. It's just it's strictly a discipline thing. Like, yeah, if you become an elite defensive rebounding team because you're scrappy and you box out and you pursue long rebounds, that will help you win games. There's no dramatic schematic element to that. It's just committing to the work and doing what you need to do to be a good defensive rebounding team. Transition defense. There are some, kind of schematic elements to it, right? Like you want to get back and stop the ball and protect the paint. And then you want to fan out to shooters from there. It's a lot of talking, communicating. But at the end of the day, it's effort. You got to sprint back in transition. You got to, there's got to be a focus element of it too when you're on offense, identifying floor balance. Like, oh, this guy's driving in a pick and roll on the right wing. I'm on the left wing. I can't crash because the roll man and the ball handler are going to be underneath the rim when this is over. I'm the only guy who's back. I'm going to start kind of drifting here a little bit as soon as I identify the ball's not going to make its way to me, right? Like there's a focus element, but most of it is just sprinting. You gotta put in the work to get back in transition. Like being deliberate about executing offensively is an attacking the margins thing. Like the vast majority of NBA teams are more efficient when they run action versus when they freelance. Being more deliberate about running action is an easy way to kind of squeeze more out of the margins of the game, right? Like we can go on and on and on, and like being really good with your execution on sideline and baseline out of bounds plays, like being really good with your execution in late game situations. There are all these different areas of the game where you can kind of, squeeze out a little extra, right? And I just don't understand why every team doesn't do that, or at least like put in a ton of effort in those areas, simply because like those are things that are under your control. You can't control if Jokic is just better than your center. You can't control if nobody on your team can guard Anthony Edwards. You can control if you get back in transition. You can't control if you're at least a competitive defensive rebounding team. And again, there's a personnel element to rebounding too, size, strength, and athleticism. But as long as you do all the right things, you give yourself a better chance. And so again, I love that philosophy. I do think that that's something that every team in the league can do. But as far as the specific offensive philosophy of Boston, it is kind of unique to their personnel. And there are teams that will try and fail at it because they don't have the right kind of guys. Do you think the Mavs will start Najee over Klay and have Klay be the sixth man at some point in the season? They announced that they will start Klay first, but to me, I feel Najee fits better with the starters and have Klay fill the Tim Hardaway Jr. role. So I've been hearing the same thing, that Klay Thompson is going to start. I don't know how that works defensively at all whatsoever. I feel like a lot of it's a concession to Klay and just his circumstance and the fact that he wants to start. But like in the long run, you need somebody that can guard Anthony Edwards the way that Derrick Jones Jr. did, that can guard the other team's best guard. And that who's going to guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams, right? Like it's a lot to ask for Klay and Kyrie Irving to do that. If you take PJ Washington and you utilize him as your primary point of attack defender, now you've removed your low man, right? That dynamic of the center, Lively in this case, being able to come up to the level of screens because PJ Washington is behind him, and that dynamic of that low man, you lose that if that becomes Klay. And Klay did not have a great season last year as a defensive rebounder and as an off-ball defender. And so that, like putting him in that role, I think could lead to some messy results as well. Najee's not as good of a point of attack defender as Derrick Jones Jr. is, but he is a good point of attack defender. He's physical and can slide his feet. And then he's a much higher level offensive player than Derrick Jones Jr. Derrick Jones Jr., really good ball handler for a role player guard, has some like off the dribble pop. And so like, I don't know if that means Najee starts, because I don't think Najee is just like a shoe-in starting caliber player. He's kind of more of like a rotational player anyway. But the moving Klay into the starters is going to lead to some issues on the defensive floor. There's no doubt. The question is, can they get enough offensively out of it for it to be worth it? Feels like KCP to the Magic has been completely overlooked. What are your thoughts on the move as well as them drafting Tristan da Silva? I was just talking about this earlier with the Nuggets, but KCP was an 82nd percentile spot-up player last year. One of the best kind of like catch-and-shoot, drive, closeout guys in the league. That was a specific weakness for Orlando, right? The ability to score from the perimeter and that allowing Cleveland to really pack the paint against them, right? So KCP just gives you more shooting. It's really that simple. It's just something to try to make things easier for Franz and for Paolo Banchero. He's a professional closeout attacker, and that is something that will make things easier for them on the offensive end of the floor. He's also a very good point of attack defender, just a much better version of Gary Harris, and somebody that it makes the Magic, you're just upgrading a starting position into a championship level starter, a proven championship level starter that's done it in two different destinations. So love the KCP pickup. I think he's going to make the Magic better. As far as Tristan da Silva, it's just kind of doubling down on what makes the Magic great, which is just lots of length and guys that kind of bring that versatile length on the perimeter, right? Just the forwards that can dribble, shoot, and pass. That's what makes the Magic, and Tristan da Silva is a natural fit there. Who do you think will rank higher at the end of their career, Anthony Edwards or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? I think it's more likely Ant. I just think he's a more superior athlete. I also think Ant is a more dynamic three-point shooting talent, which I think will benefit him well in the long run. I think Ant can be a better defender too as things get I think when Ant is Shai's age, there's a decent chance that he's the best player in the world. Like that's how highly I think of Ant. So I think that Ant will be a better player than Shai in the long run. Hey, Jason, do you think the way AD is playing right now in the Olympics that the Lakers realize getting a big is necessary if they want to contend for another title? And who can you see the Lakers trading for? This is tricky because what people are referring to, there were some plays, plays in this Australia game where Ant was the low man, where like Bam was up at the level of the screen dealing with like Patty Mills coming off an action, and Ant was like tagging a roller and then closing out to a three-point shooter in the corner. And yeah, it'd be great to have AD as a low man, but it'd be great to have Bam Adebayo too. And that's the thing, is it's probably not going to, if you get a second big to play alongside AD, it's not going to be Bam Adebayo. Most importantly, you got to look at the context of the Lakers roster. They're playing AD next to Bam without LeBron on the floor with Team USA. With the Lakers, I'd love to see an AD at the 4 look that they use throughout the season as just like an innings eater kind of thing. But the truth of the matter is you're always going down with LeBron and AD. And LeBron at age 40 is effectively another big. He has to play the 4. He has to be the low man. And so like the way I look at it, this ship always goes down for the Lakers with AD at the 5 no matter what. And so while I do think it's worth looking at backup 5s that are an upgrade that could make life easier for AD, I don't think it matters if it's not within the context of what they can actually use at the end of games. And so investing heavy resources in a backup center, I think would be a waste. Who's the 5 you're going down with? You're going down with Austin Reeves at the 1, LeBron and AD, and then a 2 and a 3. And that 2 and a 3 is not good enough right now. It's a lot of Rui Hachimura losing Michael Porter Jr. in a huge fourth quarter possession because he doesn't know how to play the 3, and D'Angelo Russell getting out-hustled for a rebound or just not doing his job on the defensive glass because he sucks at role player stuff. So, like, those 2 guys are the 2 upgrades that need to be made. And, like, any sort of resource allocation in terms of draft compensation or young players need to be directed at the 2 and the 3, because those are the 2 spots that when the shit hits the fan and you're trying to get a stop against the Denver Nuggets in Game 4 and it's 99-99 and you got PTSD from all those times that Jamal Murray hit a game winner in your face, the group you're going to go down with in the final 5 minutes of that game is AD at the 5, LeBron at the 4, Austin Reeves at the 1. Who are you playing at the 2 and 3? That's where they need to invest their resources. I would not agree with spending heavy draft compensation on a guy like Wendell Carter Jr. I really like Wendell. I like the idea of him playing next to Anthony Davis even. But I don't like it within the context of LeBron playing the 3 because he's 40 years old. And at the 3 right now, you need someone who can navigate screens. The Lakers need LeBron and AD to be 4-5, and they need their 2 and 3 to be athletes that can chase over the top of the screen. It is a must for them in order to achieve their potential offense on the defensive end of the floor. And again, AD looks fantastic, and LeBron's going to be coming out of a Team USA thing, so he's going to be kind of geared up for this season. I'm a believer in the Lakers if they can bolster the 2 and 3. I don't think they're that far off, but I do not believe in their ability to do anything until they address those 2 positional needs. And like when we talk about, I'll just skip ahead to the Laker question. How far can the Lakers get as currently constructed? As currently constructed, they are what you saw last year. They're a team that's good enough to beat anybody except for the real championship contenders. I think the Lakers would have beat a team like Minnesota. I don't think they would have beat Dallas, especially not without Jared Vanderbilt. They were one of those random teams in that matchup group where, like, past the Nuggets, it was like Thunder. Well, the Thunder actually got the 1 seed, but past Denver is my best team in the West. It was like Thunder, Timberwolves, Mavericks, Clippers, Suns, Lakers. Those teams were all on the same tier, in my opinion, and they were all matchup oriented. It just turned out that Minnesota had a really strong matchup advantage against Denver in particular, but Minnesota sucks against rim protection. They got their butts kicked by Dallas. I think they would have gotten their butts kicked by the Lakers. I think it would have been the exact same thing. I think they would have just loaded up the strong side. Anthony Davis would have shut down the paint the same way that Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford did against Anthony Edwards. I think that the same strength advantages that LeBron and Anthony Davis have would have caused the same problems for Minnesota's defense that Luka Doncic did. Those teams were all beating each other. But at the same time, we know the Lakers' particular weakness was teams that could really manipulate their spacing and take advantage of the weak side could beat them because of their lack of perimeter defenders. I think Luka would have picked the Lakers apart. I think that would have been an issue, right? Had the Lakers run into a playoff series against really quick perimeter teams like the Sacramento Kings, I think the Lakers would have lost that series, right? So right now, the Lakers are capable of beating everybody, except for the really good teams, but they're even vulnerable within that matchup tier in the middle of the league. I think if they accentuate that 2 and 3 spot, if they turn that shooting guard spot and that small forward spot into athletes that can defend and at least are competent on the offensive end of the floor, that's where I think the Lakers have the potential to enter into that top tier in the Western Conference. A guy like Bruce Brown at the 2, I think would be huge. A guy like Dorian Finney-Smith at the 3. Literally, if they just pulled those 2 moves off. I know Dorian Finney-Smith and Bruce Brown are not necessarily that much better basketball players than D'Lo and Rui Hachimura. It's specifically about the fit. D'Lo and Rui are redundant. D'Lo is redundant with Austin. Rui is redundant with LeBron. Dorian Finney-Smith is a 3, a real 3. Bruce Brown is a 2, a real 2. Those guys, and Bruce Brown needs to be a 2 next to a real skill guard like a Jamal Murray or in this case an Austin Reeves. That makes sense. Dorian Finney-Smith, he's not a high-level offensive player, so he needs to capitalize on advantages. He needs to be the 3 next to multiple ball handling fulcrums. Well, AD, LeBron, and Austin Reeves have you covered there. And so those are the kinds of moves that I think could, on the margins, that can move the Lakers into a more serious level of basketball on both ends of the floor. I'm worried about the Lakers doing that because in order to get good basketball players, you have to spend draft compensation. How did the Dallas Mavericks get Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington? Draft compensation. Are the Lakers willing to pay what it costs to get high-level role players that accentuate what their best players do? That's going to be the question we're going to find out the answer to over the course of the rest of this summer. 2 more quick ones, and then we'll get out of here. Tatum's shooting percentage and his pull-up jumper efficiency has decreased in each of the last 3 or 4 postseasons, and you've said it's just the peaks and valleys that come with shooting variance, but I think it's what he does in the offseason and all the weight training. Here's the thing. It doesn't really matter how much you lift weights as long as you continue to polish up your shot. There are a lot of really buff guys around the league that can shoot. That to me is a cop-out. I mean, Desmond Bane literally looks like a cartoon character with how big his arms are on his body, and the dude's just an absolute laser from the three-point line. Kawhi Leonard is built like an absolute truck, and he can shoot like crazy, right? So to me, it's just right now, Tatum's going through some stuff with his form. He's got a little bit of a hitch right now. You can tell he's a little bit just generally slumping in terms of his confidence. He airballed a corner 3 in the USA-Australia game today. So, I think he'll get out of it. But right now, the big thing for me is I just see a little bit of a hitch as he's gathering his shot, as he's kind of coming up in front of his chest into a shooting pocket. He's just a little bit hitchy there, and that's the thing he's got to work out. Last question. Do you think Luka can be considered the second best player on the planet after getting exposed for all-time bad defense in the finals? And then he put in parentheses, so bad it's impossible to win with. One thing here. Boston, let's credit Boston in the sense that they are uniquely equipped to punish teams that typically need to hide one of their lesser defensive players. I think there are a lot of stars in the league that would have struggled against Boston. I think Jokic would have struggled on defense against Boston. I think a guy like a Steph Curry might have struggled against Boston defensively. I think that a lot of the slower footed players would have struggled, right? I don't think they would have been as bad as Luka. I think Luka was exceptionally bad, and I think that's something that he needs to deal with. But I think he's going to deal with it this summer too. Like, I think that was kind of a humbling experience for him. But I think Boston in general just kind of made that situation look worse than it actually was. And I'm not ready to bail on Luka as one of the best players in the world because he had a bad playoff series. A lot of really good players before him have had bad playoff series and have rebounded.